at 11:43 p.m. on the 14th of October 2023. The surveillance cameras from Ridgeline Express Station capture a 19-year-old girl, Megan Walker, stepping through the automatic doors. Her phone screen illuminates her face as she walks toward the refrigerated section, unaware that every movement of hers is being silently documented. Inside the station store, a 37-year-old man, Tom Hayes, stood motionless near the coffee counter, his eyes tracking her movements. As Megan collected her change and turned, Tom stood just 3 feet away, and their eyes met for a second. Megan exited through the same automatic doors, and it was the last time she was seen alive. Megan Walker lived on the second floor of an apartment in Olympia, Washington, where she balanced her college with weekend shifts at a veterinary clinic. Her professor described her as a consistent student, always arriving 10 minutes early to class with color-coded notes neatly arranged. She sat in the front row, asked questions, and had earned a 3.8 GPA across 3 semesters. Co-workers at Northgate Veterinary Clinic knew her as the person who always volunteered for the injured animals. Dr. Linda Archen, the clinic's lead veterinarian, recalled Megan's particular connection with animals that had experienced trauma, and how she always stayed late to ensure that every kennel was clean, every animal had fresh water, and the surgical instruments were properly sterilized for Monday morning procedures. Friends knew that they could rely on her to show up exactly when she said she would. In all, Megan was a likable person. On October 15th, Megan's roommate, Anna Brooks, told the police about Megan's habit of stopping at Ridgeline Express Station every Saturday night after closing the clinic and always ordering the same items: bottled water, trail mix, and whatever magazine caught her attention. This routine had continued unchanged for 7 months. The evening of October 14th had followed the familiar pattern. Megan clocked out of the veterinary clinic at 11:28 p.m., sent her roommate a text confirming she'd be home in 20 minutes, and drove her black Honda Accord towards the gas station 3 miles from their apartment. Security footage from the clinic's parking lot showed her vehicle departing at 11:31 p.m. Traffic cameras captured her Honda passing through 2 intersections, obeying speed limits and using turn signals. Nothing appeared unusual. At 11:43 p.m., she arrived at Ridgeline Express Station. The interaction inside lasted 4 minutes, after which the timeline fractures. Anna waited until 12:30 a.m. before texting Megan. With no response, she called her at 12:47 a.m. The call went to voicemail immediately. By 1:15 a.m., Anna drove to Ridgeline Express Station herself, but Megan's car was not in the parking lot. The station attendant, Ryan, remembered serving a young woman around 11:45 p.m., but couldn't recall specific details. At 6:17 a.m., 7 hours after Megan's disappearance, Anna contacted Megan's mother, who immediately called the police. Detective Sarah Vance of Olympia PD's Missing Persons Unit took the initial report. The standard protocol required waiting 24 hours before classifying someone as officially missing, and Megan's case was no exception. After almost 26 hours of Megan's disappearance, the investigation finally started as Vance requested surveillance footage from Ridgeline Express Station. The station's manager provided access to 6 cameras, 2 covering the fuel pumps, 2 monitoring the interior, 1 tracking the entrance, and 1 overlooking the parking lot. The interior camera angles revealed what Ryan Park had not observed during his shift. A man later identified as Tom Hayes had entered the station at 11:39 p.m., 4 minutes before Megan's arrival. He purchased nothing and moved through the aisles without purpose. When Megan entered, his behavior changed. He maintained distance but adjusted his position each time she moved. The camera captured him watching her select items, following her path through the store, and positioning himself behind her at the checkout. Detective Vance reviewed the parking lot footage next. At 11:47 p.m., Megan exited the station and walked towards the left side of the lot, beyond the camera's range. Tom Hayes emerged 6 seconds later, moving in the same direction. The angle showed partial views. Vance noted the timestamp and requested footage from surrounding businesses. A dental office across the street had a camera pointed towards the intersection. That footage showed Megan's car leaving the gas station parking lot at 11:51 p.m., but a second vehicle, a dark-colored pickup truck, followed immediately behind, maintaining close distance through 3 traffic lights before both vehicles disappeared from view. Detective Vance began with vehicle identification. The pickup truck's make and model were difficult to confirm from the dental office footage, but not impossible for forensic video analysts. The vehicle appeared to be a Chevrolet Silverado, dark blue or black, model year between 2015 and 2018. Washington State DMV records showed 3,847 registered vehicles matching that description in Thurston County alone. Ryan Park, the station attendant, was re-interviewed. He described the customer as approximately 6 feet tall, medium build, wearing a dark jacket. Park recalled that the man had spoken briefly, asking about the restroom location, then left without purchasing anything. This detail contradicted the surveillance footage timeline. Hayes had entered at 11:39 p.m., asked about the restroom at 11:41 p.m., but didn't leave until after Megan's departure at 11:47 p.m. Park had not noticed Hayes waiting inside the store. Detective Vance circulated screenshots from the surveillance footage to area law enforcement. Within 6 hours, a patrol officer recognized Tom Hayes. He had a record of assault charges in 2014, a domestic violence conviction in 2016, and a parole violation in 2019. Hayes had been released from Cedar Creek Corrections Center on the 2nd of September 2023, 6 weeks before Megan's disappearance. His parole conditions included mandatory check-ins every 2 weeks, no contact with prior victims, and GPS ankle monitoring between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Detectives obtained a warrant for Hayes' GPS monitoring records. The data showed his ankle bracelet registering at his registered address, a motel room on Pacific Avenue from 10:03 p.m. on October 14th until 6:02 a.m. on October 15th. The monitoring device showed no violations and no movement outside the designated radius. This presented an immediate problem. The surveillance footage clearly showed Hayes inside Ridgeline Express Station at 11:43 p.m., yet his GPS ankle monitor placed him 3 miles away at his motel room during that exact time. Detective Vance drove to the motel to interview Hayes directly, but the room was empty. The motel manager confirmed Hayes had paid through October 17th, but hadn't been seen since the afternoon of October 14th. His truck, a 2016 Chevrolet Silverado, dark blue, was not in the parking lot. Vance contacted Hayes' parole officer, Dennis Mora, who had last spoken with Hayes during a scheduled check-in on October 12th. Mora described Hayes as a compliant man, employed part-time at a warehouse, showing no signs of agitation or instability. However, Mora noted that Hayes had recently missed 2 counseling appointments without explanation. The investigation expanded to include Hayes' employment records and known associates. His employer at Bridgeport Logistics confirmed Hayes had worked a shift on October 14th from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Co-workers described him as quiet, kept to himself, and ate lunch alone. Detectives also interviewed Hayes' ex-girlfriend, the victim in his 2016 domestic violence case. She had not heard from him in 3 years but described a pattern of behavior: obsessive monitoring, following her to work, showing up unannounced at places she frequented. The relationship ended after he physically assaulted her during an argument about her visiting a friend. Hayes' GPS ankle monitor data created an alibi that contradicted visual evidence. Detective Vance consulted with the Washington State Department of Corrections to examine potential technical failures or tampering. A corrections technician reviewed the monitoring device's transmission logs and explained a vulnerability. GPS ankle monitors transmit signals based on triangulation between the device and cell towers. If the device itself remained at the registered location while the wearer departed, the system would continue registering compliance. However, ankle monitors are designed with tamper detection sensors. Any attempt to cut, remove, or block the device triggers an immediate alert to the monitoring center. But Hayes' device had transmitted no such alerts. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Hayes' motel room. Inside the room, investigators found Hayes' ankle monitor on the bathroom floor, still transmitting. The device had been carefully opened, and the sensor had been disabled by inserting a thin copper wire to bypass the circuit. This required technical knowledge beyond what Hayes' criminal record suggested. Forensic examination of the device revealed fingerprints belonging to Hayes and an unidentified second person. DNA swabs from the wire casing identified epithelial cells consistent with Hayes' profile, but also traced DNA from another individual. While waiting for DNA results, investigators traced Hayes' truck through regional traffic cameras. On October 15th at 2:34 a.m., a camera near Joint Base Lewis McChord captured his Chevrolet Silverado heading south on Interstate 5. By 4:17 a.m., another camera showed the same vehicle traveling north, returning toward Olympia. The truck's license plate was clearly visible in enhanced footage. Detectives issued a statewide BOLO for the vehicle and Hayes. On October 20th, a patrol officer spotted the Silverado parked behind a warehouse in Fife, Washington. The truck was empty. Forensic teams processed the truck immediately. Faint bloodstains were discovered on the passenger seat and floor mat, concentrated patterns suggesting significant blood loss from a head wound. Luminol testing revealed additional blood evidence that had been cleaned but remained detectable under chemical reaction. The luminol solution fluoresced blue-white under UV light, mapping areas where blood had been present before cleaning attempts. The team also captured the ghostly outline of handprints on the passenger door. Hair fibers consistent with Megan's description were collected from the seatbelt using adhesive tape lifts. The truck's onboard diagnostic system also retained speed and braking data. Records determined that Hayes had driven at excessive speeds, 75 miles per hour, in 55 miles per hour zones between Olympia and Rochester during the critical time frame. The braking patterns showed multiple abrupt stops along rural roads, suggesting Hayes had pulled over repeatedly, possibly to subdue Megan or check for witnesses. This data corroborated the timeline investigators had constructed from cell tower records and traffic camera footage. Detectives secured a second search warrant for the property, which belonged to Hayes' uncle. Deceased since 2021, the property had remained unused and unsold, isolated on 14 acres of forested land. On October 21st, search teams entered the Rochester property at 7:34 a.m. under overcast skies and light drizzle. The search warrant authorized examination of all structures on the 14-acre parcel, including the main house, a detached shed, and a collapsed barn near the property's eastern boundary. Detective Vance led a team of 8 investigators, accompanied by Officer Kim and her cadaver detection dog, a German Shepherd named Atlas. The main house showed signs of prolonged abandonment, broken windows, overgrown vegetation pressing against the foundation, and interior surfaces covered in dust and debris. Investigators documented the condition, carefully checking each room for evidence of recent disturbance. The living room contained furniture from the 1990s, covered in sheets. The kitchen had been left with dishes in the sink, now coated in years of grime. Upstairs bedrooms revealed similar states of neglect, with no indication anyone had entered the property recently. Atlas alerted near the shed at 8:47 a.m. The dog sat abruptly outside the shed's padlocked door. Officer Kim confirmed the alert using standardized canine detection protocols, rewarding Atlas and documenting the location. Detective Vance noted fresh scratches on the metal surface consistent with recent use. The shed door swung open, revealing an interior approximately 12 feet by 15 feet, with concrete flooring and plywood walls. Inside the shed, there were basic farm items and tools. However, Atlas kept barking at the trough placed against the side wall. Detective Vance approached slowly, documenting each step with her body-worn camera. On the outside, the trough was filled with farm waste and manure. But on careful examination, the investigators found an actively decayed human body, buried in the manure, later identified as Megan Walker. Megan's clothes were also discovered inside the shed, burnt in the fireplace along with her belongings. The medical examiner arrived at 10:15 a.m. Megan's body had almost decomposed. The manure had accelerated the process, making it difficult for the examiners to estimate the cause of her death. However, a preliminary examination confirmed signs of sexual assault and violence. 19-year-old Megan had been deceased for approximately 5 days, based on decomposition progression, temperature data, and insect activity. Forensic teams collected trace evidence from the shed's interior. Shoe impressions and dust on the concrete floor matched the tread pattern of boots later recovered from Hayes' motel room. A tire iron was discovered in the corner of the fireplace, partially melted. It bore vaguely visible bloodstains and dents. The tool matched the description of an item missing from Hayes' truck inventory, according to the vehicle's owner's manual specifications. The investigation transitioned from a missing person to a homicide. Detective Vance interviewed Hayes' cellmate from his 2019 incarceration at Cedar Creek. The cellmate, granted immunity in exchange for testimony, revealed that Hayes had frequently discussed his frustration with electronic monitoring. Hayes had apparently met someone during his final weeks at Cedar Creek, a fellow inmate who had explained methods for defeating ankle monitor tamper sensors. This inmate, identified as Christopher Lang, was serving time for fraud and theft charges. Lang had been released on September 15th, 2 weeks after Hayes. Detectives located Lang at a halfway house in Seattle. Lang initially denied involvement but agreed to provide DNA samples. The results matched the unidentified DNA found on the copper wire inside Hayes' ankle monitor. Lang admitted to helping Hayes disable the device in exchange for $500. He also claimed that he drove Megan's car away from the gas station's parking lot. This was new information added to the case because it meant that Tom had already abducted Megan in the parking lot. Lang denied any knowledge of Megan or Tom's intentions. He claimed that he simply helped Tom get rid of his ankle monitor and drove a random car away from the parking lot, believing that Hayes simply wanted freedom from parole restrictions. Lang demonstrated how the bypass worked. By completing the circuit with a thin wire, the tamper sensor believed the device remained intact, even when removed from Hayes' ankle. With Lang's testimony and the physical evidence from Hayes' truck, prosecutors obtained an arrest warrant. On October 23rd, Tom Hayes was apprehended at a motel in Olympia. During transport to the Olympia Police Department, Hayes had a smug expression on his face. In the interrogation room, Detective Vance presented surveillance footage, GPS data contradictions, and forensic evidence linking Hayes to Megan's abduction and murder. Hayes did not resist. He did not deny. He accepted everything. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. DNA analysis confirmed that bloodstains in Hayes' truck matched Megan Walker's profile. Hair fibers recovered from the truck were consistent with Megan's hair samples. Soil samples from Hayes' truck bed matched the soil composition at the Rochester property. Cell tower records placed Hayes' phone near Ridgeline Express Station at 11:43 p.m., contradicting his alibi. Detective Vance reconstructed the timeline with precision. Hayes had disabled his ankle monitor sometime between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. on October 14th. He drove to Ridgeline Express Station, arriving at 11:39 p.m. He waited inside until Megan arrived, then followed her to the parking lot. Surveillance footage showed Megan walking toward her Honda, Hayes approaching from behind. The dental office camera captured Hayes, forcing Megan into his truck at 11:49 p.m. He drove south on Interstate 5, reaching the Rochester property by 12:47 a.m. based on cell tower triangulation. The medical examiner estimated Megan's time of death between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on October 15th. Hayes returned to Olympia by 4:17 a.m., replaced his ankle monitor at the motel, and resumed normal monitoring compliance by 6 a.m. Prosecutors charged Tom Hayes with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and tampering with electronic monitoring equipment. Christopher Lang was charged with conspiracy and aiding a parole violator. Trial began on the 4th of March 2024 in Thurston County Superior Court before Judge Catherine Morrison. Lead prosecutor David Hernandez presented opening statements that lasted 42 minutes, outlining how Hayes had planned and executed Megan's abduction. On the fourth day, Detective Vance took the stand for 6 hours of testimony. She walked the jury through the investigation timeline. Hernandez introduced Hayes' ankle monitor into evidence, passing the device to jurors for examination, and highlighted the technical vulnerability. Vance demonstrated the copper wire bypass method using a duplicate monitoring device, showing how Lang's modification had allowed Hayes to remove the ankle bracelet without triggering tamper alerts. The defense attempted to establish reasonable doubt by suggesting that GPS data could be unreliable, and Hayes might have been framed by someone else who had stolen his truck. But Tom remained eerily composed, showing no regret or guilt on his face. The medical examiner presented autopsy findings describing multiple blunt force trauma injuries to Megan's skull, consistent with being struck 10 to 11 times with a heavy cylindrical object. She explained that the wound patterns matched the dimensions of a tire iron recovered from Hayes' truck. She showed photographs of the injuries and described how Megan's defensive wounds indicated she had attempted to shield her head with her hands and forearms. She also confirmed evident signs of sexual abuse and burn marks all over Megan's body, indicating clear signs that Tom attempted to burn Megan's body before burying it in the trough and filling it with manure to accelerate decomposition. The defense called 3 witnesses during days 8 and 9 of the trial. A forensic psychologist testified that Hayes had been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, but that this diagnosis did not eliminate his capacity to understand right from wrong. Hayes' former employer testified that Hayes had seemed like a normal employee, never displaying violent behavior at work. Hayes' sister testified that he had experienced childhood trauma and had been working to rehabilitate himself since his release from Cedar Creek. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Hayes' presence at the gas station did not prove he had harmed Megan. The defense suggested an alternative theory. Megan had encountered someone else after leaving the gas station, and Hayes had been incorrectly identified as the perpetrator. This argument collapsed during cross-examination. The prosecution demonstrated that Hayes' DNA was found not only in his truck, but also under Megan's fingernails. Epithelial cells recovered from beneath Megan's fingernails contained DNA matching Hayes' profile, indicating she had scratched him during the struggle. Blood spatter analysis from the truck's interior matched patterns consistent with blunt force trauma delivered while Megan was seated in the passenger position. The medical examiner testified that the wounds were inflicted with an object matching a tire iron recovered from Hayes' truck, which tested positive for Megan's blood despite cleaning attempts. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. On the 19th of March 2024, they returned a guilty verdict on all charges. During sentencing on the 12th of April 2024, Megan's mother addressed the court. She described her daughter's kindness, her dedication to helping animals who couldn't help themselves, her plans to transfer to a 4-year university and pursue veterinary medicine. She spoke directly to Hayes, asking why he had chosen Megan, why he had taken her life. Hayes just looked at her mockingly, as if he had no regret for anything he did. Judge Catherine Morrison sentenced Hayes to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for first-degree murder, plus consecutive sentences totaling 35 years for kidnapping and electronic monitoring tampering. Christopher Lang received a sentence of 8 years for conspiracy and aiding a parole violation. The Ridgeline Express station still operates 24 hours a day. Customers still pass through the same automatic doors. The coffee machines still hum late into the night. Only a few of them know that on the 14th of October 2023, Megan Walker walked through those same doors and never truly made it home again. Some people came on the street demanding a death sentence for Tom Hayes, but the case was just closed with life imprisonment. Washington State Department of Corrections revised its electronic monitoring protocols, implementing new tamper detection technology. The veterinary clinic where Megan worked displays a plaque in her honor near the reception area, alongside photographs of animals she helped treat during her time there. Megan's friends still send messages to her phone. Some of them know they will never be read. They send them anyway. Megan's family never returned to Ridgeline Express station. Her bedroom remained exactly as she left it, her jacket still hanging behind the door. Megan Walker would have turned 21 this year. Subscribe for more true crime stories to stay aware, because every story like Megan Walker's reminds us how much still needs to change.